The first thing we want to do before we color any of the organs is to put in the muscles. Now you can use any color you want for any of these things as long as you coordinate your color up here with the box down here. So I've chosen a brown for my muscles. You can choose a different color if you'd like, and you can check the colored answer key that I've provided and see if you like those colors. That's the guideline I'm going to kind of go by, but you can change the colors. There's no reason that you have to use a particular color for any organ. But I'm going to use brown, and then I'm going to start putting in some muscles in these areas where the legs attach. So you recognize this is the back side of the thorax, and so these are like the coxa down here. You need to have the trochanter, you need to have the femur coming off like that. So this is where the legs come off, and anytime you have motion, you have to have muscles. That's what moves things in any body, in a mammal, in a reptile, in a bird, and in insects. Muscles are what makes things move. Now, our muscles are attached to our bones, but of course insects don't have bones, so their muscles attach to the inside of that hard exoskeleton, the chitin here. That's where the muscles attach. Now, you don't have to follow exactly what I'm doing because I don't know exactly what I'm doing. I have searched and searched for pictures on the internet of where insect muscles are, and the diagrams are extremely difficult to find. Sometimes you'll find a few that show where the flight muscles are, like in a wing of a bumblebee, and I found one that showed a little bit where they are up here by the mandible, but this is extremely difficult to find, so we're kind of just winging it here. The main point is that we know that there's muscles. There's got to be lots of muscles in here, and that they attach to the cytoskeleton for anchoring, because to get power you have to anchor to something. So now some of these might actually come up and attach to the exoskeleton kind of out here, because remember this is three-dimensional. We're drawing in 2D, but the insect is 3D, so maybe one might go from here up to here. So it would kind of just like trail off, and you wouldn't see the end of it because we're imagining it's kind of coming up at us. But however you do this, it will be fine as long as we indicate that we know that there are muscles. Now the only real insect muscles that I've seen that I actually knew what they were was in a dried out large grasshopper, and they kind of looked like white chicken meat that was all powdery and dry. It was kind of, I don't know, didn't look too much like muscles. So I'm not putting too many in the top here because I'm going to use this for some other little things. I'm going to put my little tracheal tubes up here, so I'm kind of keeping them a little bit down this way. So over here we know that there's muscles that move the mandible, and if you've ever been pinched by an ant, you know that those mandibles are strong. So there would have to be strong muscles in here controlling the mandible. And it can move its head up and down, so you could put muscles here in the neck. And around the antennae, this little dotted thing here, this is where the antennae kind of comes off. So the antennae moves around a lot, so you'd have rings of muscles around the antennae as well. And it can also move its abdomen. It can pull its abdomen underneath itself, so there's got to be muscles here allowing it to move its abdomen. And one more place you're going to find muscles is in this tube, but we're going to be coloring this a different color. So, and these muscles are going to be sort of small, so this is kind of difficult. You'd have these probably rings of muscles going around here. Maybe some also going this way. If it's like other tubes and other little tiny organisms that I've read about, there'd be muscles going this way and muscles going around both. And like I said, that's going to be, would be much harder to see. Now speaking of that tube, let's go ahead and color it. This is what I've written down here as heart in quotes. I'm going to make mine red just because, well, you know, hearts have to be red, right? And it's not really a heart, not like ours. It doesn't have chambers, so it's not a true heart. It's just a tube that contracts. So in that sense, it's more like one of our blood vessels. It's just a tube. And of course, we've already indicated there it has muscles that help it to contract. And there are some one-way valves in here, like our blood vessels have. There would be little valves that would, when it pushes and squeezes, that the one-way valves would help the fluid to go in one direction instead of just going back and forth and going nowhere. It would help to push it through and out, pushing it through and out, and so you get this circulating thing going on. And that's its job, is just to swish around the fluid in here. Now this would be a good time to point out, though, that there's no blood vessels coming off here, and the ant doesn't have blood. So we have this vessel, which if you looked inside, it's not going to look red. It would just look clear. And the fluid around here is just clear also. It's called hemolymph, and the word hemo means blood, so it functions sort of like blood, but it really isn't. And lymph actually is a very good term. We have lymph fluid in our body, and this would be very similar to our lymph fluid that goes throughout our lymph system. So if you want to make a note about that somewhere, you can. You don't have to, though. This is a little extra. Hemolymph is body fluid. I'm going to put no blood. This is just pointing to the white in the background there. So in our bodies, one of the main jobs that the heart and the blood vessels do is to get oxygen to all the tissues. So that's not true here. This is pushing this hemolymph around, but oxygen is not in the hemolymph. The oxygen comes in through those little spiracles, remember? We saw them on the other side on the external view. Little air holes that come in, and then there's tubes that branch off. They go everywhere, all over. And I'm just using a regular pencil for these. And the most important thing is that they are going to deliver oxygen to the muscles, because like our muscles, insect muscles need oxygen in order to operate. So all these little tubes would be stretching out everywhere. Now I don't think you can really see this fine net growth tubes. This would be so small if you looked under a microscope. I don't even think you could really see these. You'd see maybe some of the large branches coming in from the spiracles. Then pretty soon these are going to be too small to see without a really good microscope. And so these would also have to go into, it would have to go through here into the abdomen. There would have to be oxygen delivery down to here. You'd need oxygen for these things. And I don't think there's any, sometimes there's a spiracle right here. This may be the one that can lead to this area. And there would have to be tracheals going here. So everything needs oxygen. And before I forget, I'm going to put my key. The tracheal tubes are gray. Okay, they don't have to be perfect as long as we know they're there. Now something else that branches all over the place is the nervous system. This bottom line down here, which I'm going to color purple. You don't have to make it purple, but to me nervous systems are purple. This is actually a lot similar to our nervous system. So we go up here, we get to the brain region, and there is this large area that they call the brain. Now of course it doesn't look or act a lot like our brain. Ours has all those little ridges and bumps, and it's fairly large and well developed. And with the ant, a better word for the brain would actually be large ganglion. These bumps here, these little lumps, are called ganglia. 1 ganglion, 2 ganglia. And they're just areas where you have a lot more nerve cells. The cell bodies are all here, so it's bigger. And then going out from here, you would have the little axons and dendrites of the nerves. You would have branching because the nerves control the muscles. Like the insect decides, I need to jump. The brain says, get me out of here. The eye would see something coming, and the brain would then quickly decide, we need to jump away or run away. And then the signals will be sent out to the muscles to move. Just like in our bodies. Very, very similar. So we have these things all branching out. I suppose you'd have some branching down here too. You must have some branching down to these muscles. Okay, and again, you don't have to get it all perfect, just that we know that they're there. We know that that's the nervous system, and there's branches going out from it. And you need to have nerves controlling the glands. You'd actually have some going all the way down here to control those glands. You have some controlling that. You'd have some maybe going in up here and controlling the contractions of the heart tube, maybe. Although the heart tube might be mostly kind of just reflex on its own. Okay, and then let's label right here, number 1, that's the brain. And then they have a special name kind of for this area down here, but that right there is kind of like the brain. And then these are called ganglia. 1 ganglion, 1 ganglion, 1 ganglion. And make sure that I remember to color the box in my little key down there. I'm just going to go straight down the list and do the digestive system next. And that's the middle line. I'm coloring now. That's the esophagus. The tube that takes the food down to the stomach. And up here, the front part, this is called the pharynx. And pharynx basically means throat. So I can go ahead and label that. Pharynx would be number 2. And this is the region where the ant would sort out the food particles. You notice how narrow these areas are, especially the waist here. There's like nothing to it. So you can imagine that nothing very big is going to go through here. I mean, a piece of food the size of a sand grain would be huge. It would never get through here. So basically only liquid passes through here. Big chunks the ant would spit out. In fact, pretty small chunks it's going to spit out too. So just liquid can go through. So that's the pharynx. This pipe is the esophagus, number 3. Just like ours, connects the throat to the stomach. And then down here, this first stomach area is called either the crop or the social stomach. Sometimes you see other words for it too, but those are the most common. And that would be number 4. And then there's a little valve here. There's a one-way valve that keeps food from coming up from the area number 5, which we're now coloring. So number 5 is going to be its actual stomach, similar to our stomach. The equivalent would be our actual stomach. So we don't have anything like 4. Birds have a crop, and maybe some other animals too, but Humans don't have anything like number 4. And then number 6 down here, the hindgut. This is a little bit like our large intestine. This is where the food is processed and made ready to exit through the anus, and you actually do call it through the anus, just like in mammals. Now number 4, the crop, or the social stomach, is basically a big storage bag. No digestion takes place here. So the ant can bring food up through the pipe again and basically spit it, if you want to use the word spit, back out its mouth, and this way it can share food and with other ants. Now some people say the ant is vomiting or spitting up or something. No, if food came up from number 5, that would be the ant vomiting. When food comes up from this, it's just a storage area. Because I mean, hey, an ant doesn't have a box or a bag the way we do to carry things. It's an ant. It doesn't have a carrying except for its mandible. It can hold things in its mandible, but if it's a liquid, what's it going to do? And so this is the storage area. So, and again, there's a one-way valve here that keeps things going this way so that food can't come up from the real stomach and get it back into here. And then the food passes down into here and becomes feces and exits. Now, while we're down this region, oops, wait a second, let me color in that box. Don't forget to color the key. And while we're down here at the stomachs, I'm going to do the Malpighian tubules. And they kind of start here and go up like this. They lie outside the stomach, so we're going to have to try to make this look like it's going over the stomach. And then some would be behind also here, but I'll just draw the ones that are outside. So there's little tubes that act a little bit like our kidneys. These tubes collect chemical wastes that are floating around in the fluid here, in the hemolymph fluid. And the wastes would come in through here, and then they would be added to the waste that's already in here. So because these function a little like kidneys, you could say maybe that what they produce is urine, although it's solid. So that kind of doesn't make sense, solid urine, but there's not a lot of water here. The water gets pressed out of it. So it only has one exit, so what would be urine, would be feces, all come together and go out the exit there. So again, these are Malpighian tubules, and they act a lot like kidneys, collecting chemical wastes from liquid. Now for the glands. I guess we can just go in order here. And we'll start with the metapleural gland then. And this is located right here. I'm going to have to add it right there. And that, as it says here, makes an antibiotic liquid. So there's a little exit onto the surface here, a little duct, where this liquid can leak out onto the surface. Put a little on the surface like that. There you go. And the ant can then bring its legs up and rub its feet and legs in this, because they're very flexible. They can get their legs up there. And then they can distribute that all over their body. So when they groom, they can kind of brush this liquid all over. And this is just a germ killer. This is like taking hand sanitizer, you know how we do, and rub it all over our hands. This is the ant's personal little sanitizer area, and that keeps it germ free. The neat thing is that scientists are studying these chemicals that are made by these glands because the bacteria are not becoming resistant to this. This stuff works as well as it has for hundreds of years, as long as we've been studying ants. And our medicines are not working so well anymore. The bacteria are learning how to not be susceptible to the medicines. So the medicines aren't working so well. So what are we going to do when we can't fight the bacteria with the medicines we have? Well, they're looking to other options. As one is, well, can we make a medicine from this? Works well for the ant. Will it work for people? I don't know. They're studying it. Okay, the next one is the poison gland. And that would be right back here. And when we say poison, we actually mean kind of an acid. It says usually contains formic acid, and formis is Latin for ant, so it's ant acid. And if you've ever gotten stung by an ant, you know, it burns. It's burny in the same way that if you get battery acid on you, or even if you get a little cut and some lemon juice gets in it, something acidic, it stings. So this is more of a stinging thing. This isn't actual venom like you'd find in like a tree frog or a snake. Those are a total different thing. They actually affect your nerves. Here we just have something that's extremely irritating, like formic acid. And you'll find some variations in this between ant species and also in different types of ants, the workers, the soldiers, etc. There'll be some variation in what's in it and how it functions and things like that. Okay, now for the communication glands, and they do have names. Some of them, this is Dufour's gland and Pavin's gland, but let's not bother with that. Let's just call them communication glands because that's what they're used for. These glands, and there's one up here too, make pheromones, which are chemicals that the ants can sense with their antennae, and they help them to communicate things like the food is over here or there's danger over there. For example, the ones in the back, these would be used to spread chemicals to make a trail, and that's how ants can follow each other. The lead ant leaves a little trail, drags its abdomen along and leaves a trail of smelly pheromones, and then the ants behind it, they're using their antennae and they're sensing that and they're following along that trail. They're not really watching where the ant goes, they're smelling where it goes. And some of these too, like this one, can be used for danger signals, and that's how ants talk. They use chemicals. So they can be used for a variety of communication purposes. Alright, the postpharyngeal gland is right here. It's this thing that looks like a glove for an octopus. A lot of little tubes that come right off the pharynx, and the word post means after, and pharyngeal has to do with the pharynx. So this is the after the pharynx gland, and you can see it comes after at the back of the pharynx. And what this does, takes a little bit of the food as it's going through, and it converts it to an oily yellow substance that maybe functions a little bit like fat in our fat cells, so we can store energy for later use, and if there's food isn't available, our body can tap into the fat cells. They think that that's a little bit what's going on here, but also it seems like some ants can then take the things back out, and it can go back out the mouth again, and it can share with other ants or with larvae. And some ants, it looks like it has something to do with communication as well, but they're not exactly sure what. They're still researching that. But that's the postpharyngeal gland. And then the labial gland is up here. Now labia means lips. Now an ant doesn't have lips, but it does have labial palps. It goes behind here, down to here, so we don't see the labial palps. They would be those little finger-like things that help bring food into the mouth. And this is a lot like our salivary glands, which is kind of odd. It's located way up here in the thorax, and stuff has to come all the way down here to get to the mouth. But the best comparison is that it's like our salivary glands. And the last gland we have on here, the digestive glands. There's some various glands along the way that make helpful chemicals, helping in the digestion process. Also, that's not ruling out that they might be used for communication. Like with an ant, it seems like everything is used for communication. It just exudes chemicals everywhere. An ant is like a chemical factory, which is necessary because that's how it communicates.